Lila Brenner slapped me in front of every donor, musician, and dinner guest inside Whitlock Hall. And my husband stepped between us before I could even taste the blood on my lip. The room went quiet in that awful grown-up way. Not shocked enough to help. Not brave enough to look away. While her hand still hovered near the pearl necklace that belonged to my mother. Grant Bellamy caught Lila by the shoulders and pulled her behind him. Like I was the danger in my own building. "If you touch her, Marin, we divorce tonight," he warned. And the threat carried farther than the slap because he wanted it heard. I pressed the back of my fingers to my mouth and looked at him first. Not her, because Lila only had the courage Grant had loaned her. He did not ask if I was hurt. Did not look at the red mark blooming across my cheek. Did not lower his voice until he noticed Hazel Monroe standing near the stage with her band waiting behind her. Lila wore a pale champagne dress, my mother's pearls, and the kind of smile women wear when a married man has spent months telling them the wife is already gone. Grant leaned closer and murmured, "Go upstairs, clean your face, and do not ruin this night." That was when I saw the rest of it, not as suspicion, but as proof sitting in plain sight. My place card had been moved from the host table to the side row. Lila's name had been printed beside Grant's on the evening program, and the private green room key on her wrist was the black one, only my office issued. She touched the pearls again and whispered, "He chose me." Like a necklace stolen from a locked drawer could make that true. I picked up the small table microphone, felt Grant's breath stop beside me, and let the whole room hear me clearly. Grant has asked for a divorce if I touch the woman who just slapped me. So I will respect his exact words. I kept the microphone close enough for Grant to hear his own threat come back through the room. And that was the first time his face lost its polish. He reached for the switch. But Owen Pritchard had already stepped away from the service wall, calm in his black suit. One palm open toward Lila's wrist. The black green room key hung there like jewelry. The same key my office issued for artist corridors. Contract storage. And the private room where my mother's framed opening night program still sat above the desk. "Return the key," Owen said. Not loud. Not rough. Just official enough to make Lila look at Grant instead of me. Grant lifted his chin and tried the voice he used on donors who liked expensive certainty. "I authorized her access," he said, and a few people near the front table shifted as if that should settle it. It did not, because the key reader beside the backstage door still showed Lila Brenner's name under temporary vendor. Not partner. Not director. Not anything Grant had been whispering into her ear for months. "You can invite a guest," I said, "but you cannot give away rooms you do not control." Owen held his hand steady until Lila unclipped the key from her bracelet and dropped it into his palm. The small plastic card sounded cheap when it landed, and that sound did more damage than any speech I could have made. Grant forced a laugh and turned toward the room like I was the one making things ugly. But the program screen behind him changed before he found the sentence. "Whitlock Hall. Owner and license holder. Marin Whitlock." No one cheered, because real embarrassment does not need applause to become visible. Lila stared at my name, then at the locked corridor behind her, and her smile folded into something smaller, something closer to math. Grant had given her the feeling of belonging here, but the door had answered to me. I lowered the microphone and watched the room understand the difference right there in front of every seated table. Lila's hand moved to the pearls again. Slower this time, because the locked corridor had just refused to belong to her. The necklace sat against her throat with my mother's old luster. Soft and expensive. The same strand she wore the night Whitlock Hall reopened after the fire damage years before. I did not step toward Lila, because Grant was waiting for that version of me, the wife with a raised hand and a ruined face. Owen brought the storage box from my office instead, and when he placed it on the host table, Grant looked at it like he already knew which drawer he had opened. Inside was a photograph of my mother standing beneath the marquee in those pearls, a personal insurance card with my name on it, and the access log from the cabinet behind my desk. The last entry showed Grant Bellamy at 4:12 that afternoon. 15 minutes before Lila arrived through the side entrance, wearing the necklace like a promise. Grant's voice tightened. "We're married. Marin. Family pieces are not stolen between spouses." "No," I answered, and the word landed cleaner than anger. "Marriage does not turn my mother's necklace into a costume for the woman you put at my table." Lila looked down as if the pearls had suddenly grown heavier. Grant reached for the clasp. Maybe to help her. Maybe to control how fast she obeyed. But Owen's quiet step forward stopped him before his fingers touched her neck. Lila unclasped it herself, and her confidence came apart with the strand, bead by bead, until she laid it in the open box without looking at me. Hazel Monroe stood near the stage, her band still waiting, and her voice carried just enough when she said she would not sing the tribute Grant had altered that morning. The room did not need a speech after that, because the necklace, the access log, and the changed program were all saying the same thing. The program screen still carried my name, but the damage Grant had planned sat underneath it in smaller lines. Lila Brenner, Experience Director, appeared beside his name where my team had never approved it, and Hazel Monroe's opening tribute had been rewritten to thank them for bringing a new vision to Whitlock Hall. Hazel held the printed run sheet in one hand, her mouth tight, because she had agreed to sing for the touring artist scholarship, not for Grant's private announcement. I looked at the changed page, then at Lila standing without my mother's pearls, and the room understood the slap had only been the loudest part of something quieter. Grant moved close enough for his cologne to cut through the smell of wine and stage lights. "You are making yourself look bitter, Marin," he breathed, trying to keep the words under the music stand near us. I turned the run sheet so he could see Lila's name above mine, the tribute line rewritten, and the host table where my card had been moved away before I arrived. Bitter did not change the program this morning. Grant. Lila heard the sentence and looked at him, because he had told her this night was already settled, not stolen one line at a time. I gave the corrected schedule to Owen, and he passed it to the booth without any drama. The screen changed first. Lila's title gone. Grant's tribute removed. Hazel Monroe restored to the scholarship segment she had signed for. A few donors leaned toward each other, not loudly, but close enough for Grant to notice the room shifting without asking his permission. Hazel stepped nearer to the microphone and kept her voice even. "I will perform the program I agreed to perform. For the artists, this fund was built to support." Grant's face tightened because Hazel had not accused him of anything, and that made it worse. She had simply pointed back to the contract, the schedule, and the purpose printed on every invitation in the room. Lila wrapped one bare hand around the other. No title on the screen. No pearls at her throat. No key at her wrist. I did not need to call her anything. Every place Grant had tried to put her had just answered back with my name. Beatrice Wynne reached the host table without rushing, carrying a thin folder against her navy dress, like she had brought me a dinner program instead of the next door closing on Grant. She had worked with Whitlock Hall long enough to know the difference between gossip and records, and she did not open the folder until the screen behind Hazel cleared. The first line showed a weekend trip Grant had labeled as donor outreach, beside a public photo Lila had posted from the ferry deck with his hand at her waist. The second showed her private dressing room charged as artist hospitality, though no artist had used it, and the third showed gift baskets sent to Lila's friends under the name Guest Cultivation. Grant stepped forward before anyone could read too long. "Those are private expenses. Marin," he breathed, but his voice had lost the smooth edge he used when the room still belonged to him. I looked at the receipts, then at Lila's face as she realized the words were not private at all. "When you charge Whitlock Hall," I answered, "you make it part of Whitlock Hall's record." Lila turned toward him, smaller now without the pearls, and whispered, "You said that came from your account." Grant's mouth tightened so fast the truth almost showed before he covered it. Not now. Lila. That was all he gave her. 2 words sharp enough to cut the story he had been selling her for months. She looked at the screen again, where her weekend, her room, and her gifts had all been renamed as things meant for donors, artists, and guests. The room did not need numbers to understand what had happened, because every label on that page had taken something public and made it serve something private. Beatrice closed the folder and placed one clean page in front of Grant. Effective immediately. His authority to represent Whitlock Hall at sponsor tables, artist meetings, and public events was suspended pending review. No one gasped, but several donors reached for their phones, and not one of them looked at Grant before sending whatever message they were already typing. He stood in the middle of my hall with no key to hand out, no necklace to explain, no program to hide behind, and now no official voice. Then Lila asked the first honest question she had asked all night. Where am I supposed to go after this? Lila's question stayed in the room because it was the first thing Grant could not polish into confidence. Owen appeared by the side doors with 2 garment bags and a rolling case, each tagged in plain white paper, each packed with 2 staff members present. The clothes and silver shoes had come from the private green room behind my office. The room Grant called a VIP lounge whenever I asked why the lock report looked strange. Grant stepped toward the bags, his voice sharp enough to make a violinist lower her bow. That room is not yours to empty. Marin. Owen placed the service tablet beside the rolling case before Grant could reach it. The message on the screen was from Grant, sent 2 weeks earlier, telling Owen to list Lila as a visiting vendor and never put her name on room notes. Lila read it before he could turn the tablet away, and the color left her face. You told me everyone knew, she breathed. Grant cut her off with 2 words. Not now. It was exactly now, because the proof sat between her luggage and his voice. Owen kept his hands folded, waiting for instruction from the person still allowed to give one. Lila looked at me. Not sorry yet, only newly afraid, and I did not soften for her. She had known I was his wife when she sat at my table, wore my mother's pearls, and let her hand cross my face. You knew enough to choose, I said, and her eyes dropped to the bare wrist where the black key had been. Grant moved closer to her and muttered, Stop making yourself look weak. That sentence did what none of mine could have done. Lila stepped away from him instead of behind him, and the space between them showed the room what his protection cost. Owen lifted the garment bags and waited by the exit. Lila stared at Grant, then at the bags, and understood she did not have a home here, only storage he had hidden under my name. Beatrice placed the papers on the host table, not in front of the donors, just close enough for Grant to see his threat become real. He had warned me that if I touched Lila, we would divorce tonight. And I had not touched her. I had let the key, the pearls, the altered program, the expense records, and the hidden green room answer for me. Now the folder waited beside Lila's garment bags, and Grant looked at it as if paper could bruise him harder than a hand. We are not ending our marriage over one ugly scene, he said, softer now, trying to sound like a husband instead of a man losing permissions. I looked at the red mark on my reflection in the dark glass behind the bar, then at the tablet, showing his message to hide Lila's name. This was not one scene, Grant. It was the key you gave her, the necklace you took, the program you changed, the room you hid her in, and the records you renamed. His jaw worked once, but no answer survived the objects around us. He turned toward Lila because blame was the only door he still knew how to open. She made it worse. Marin. She lost control. Lila's face hardened at the speed of it, because 10 minutes earlier he had stood in front of her like she was worth ending a marriage for. She pulled her phone from her clutch, not with triumph, but with the plain fear of someone realizing she would be left holding all the shame. I am not carrying your part too, Grant. The first message appeared before he could reach her. Wear the pearls so she understands. The second followed. Take the host table if she hesitates. The third made the room go cold. If she reacts, I will handle the divorce in front of everyone. Grant stopped moving, and the silence did not protect him. I signed the receipt for the papers, because the marriage had already ended when he planned the scene and expected my dignity to make it easy. Hazel Monroe began the song with the corrected program in front of her, and the first clean note did what Grant could not. It reminded the room why people had come before he tried to turn the night into a doorway for Lila. Donors stayed because the scholarship still mattered. Staff kept moving because Owen had given them steady orders. And Whitlock Hall did not collapse just because one man lost his borrowed place. Grant reached for the microphone once more. But Owen stepped between him and the stand with one calm sentence. You are no longer on tonight's speaking list. That sentence closed more than a program slot. It closed the version of Grant who believed every room would keep making space if he spoke loudly enough. Lila left with Beatrice's card, her garment bags, and the knowledge that the slap on my face would not vanish because Grant had encouraged the scene. She would answer for her own hand, her false title, and the benefits she accepted. But I would not let him fold all of his choices into her body and walk away clean. He watched her go and tried to make it sound like proof. See, Marin. She meant nothing. I looked at the man who had threatened divorce for her an hour earlier, then offered her meaninglessness as an apology. That told me more than the messages, the receipts, or the green room ever could. The next morning, Whitlock Hall announced one quiet change. The private green room Grant had used to hide Lila would become a rest space for young touring artists who arrived without money, managers, or a safe place between shows. Grant called from a rented apartment and said I had taken everything from him. I answered once. I only took back what you borrowed from my name. Months later, the divorce was final. Owen ran operations. Hazel returned to sing. And Whitlock Hall felt lighter without Grant's shadow at every doorway. If you have ever watched someone use your silence as permission to erase you, remember this: peace does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it starts when the right doors stop opening for the wrong people, and finally open again for you.